Diabetes is up from 1% in 1970 to now 10x over the last
Yeah.
50 years, which is just crazy. And the vast majority of that, if not almost all of that, is type 2.
40% of Americans are pre-diabetic. So ostensibly within a decade, you could have 50% of the population of the United States fully diabetic. What the hell is that going to do to the healthcare cost? Dr. Robert Lustig estimated that $4.6 trillion we spend a year on healthcare. He estimated that we spend about $2.4 trillion of those dollars just treating the effects of sugar consumption alone, just sugar consumption.
Oh, that doesn't shock me. I know it's $1 trillion on diabetes patients directly. It doesn't shock me there'd be another 1.4 on other sugar-related metabolic health concerns.
Welcome to the Plant-Free MD podcast with Dr. Anthony Chaffee, where we discuss diet and nutrition and how this affects health and chronic disease, and show you how you can use this to optimize your health and happiness, both mentally and physically.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Plant-Free MD. I'm your host, Dr. Anthony Chaffee. Today, I have a very special guest, Andy Schoonover, who has a very interesting story to tell. He's been in the medical industry for quite some time and has decided to sort of buck the system and go out in a very different direction, which I think will be very interesting for everyone to hear. Andy, thank you so much for coming on.
And thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Not a problem. So you've been in the healthcare industry for quite a while, and now you've gone in a very different direction. Can you tell us a bit about that and where you're at these days with your company?
Yeah, the first healthcare company, I sold it a few years back, and I told myself that I would never do it again. Healthcare is just so hard, regulation and big insurance providers are the primary customers, and it's just a big cartel. And so I was like, I'm going to sell this company. I'm going to go and enjoy fishing and golf and eating, tacos, which is what I love to do here in Austin. So I rolled off that company. I thought I didn't have any other options than to go to the Affordable Care Act, to the Obamacare plans, and got that. Was paying $1,200 for me, my wife, and my girls, 2 girls. And I kind of joke it worked until I had to use it. My little one, who was having recurring ear infections, and I'm sure some parents out there who are listening to this will empathize. Couldn't sleep at night, was cranky the entire time. Well, we took her to the ears, nose, and throat doc, and he was like, yeah, she's got basically a hole in her eardrum. So we have to go get tubes in her ears. So we went to the only hospital in town that was in network for this procedure, went and got the procedure. It was a 15-minute procedure. Got the bill. It was $8,000 for 15 minutes. And I was just like, wow, I'd love that hourly rate, right? $8 grand for 15 minutes. And little did I know I was going to get another note in the bill, or another note in the mail from my health insurance plan that said it was medically unnecessary, and so they were not going to pay for it. I went through 3 rounds of appeals. I think my ear, nose, and throat doctor was talking to some like an ophthalmologist or something like that at the health plan. Like they were going back and forth, about my daughter's ears. So it was kind of a funny thing. But after the 3 rounds of appeals, they're like, we're not paying for it. And so it was at that point where I called him. I said, look, if you're not going to pay my bills, I'm not paying your bills. So I quit. That was about 4 years ago, a little over 4 years ago. And I have been living, as I like to say, delightfully uninsured ever since, and have built a company actually to allow people to operate outside of what I think is kind of the tyranny of health insurance, and have a lot more control and freedom over their own healthcare. So the company's called Crowd Health, and we've been around for about 3 years now. Have had 7,000 people sign up, and what in essence what we're doing is we're helping each other fund our healthcare expenses. So it's a cool, different way of doing this. And it's just been a great experience.
So what's the system, how you guys are doing this? So is it people sort of try to chip in and help out, or is this sort of like a healthcare savings plan sort of thing?
Yeah, it's kind of in between. So the mechanics of how it works is if you sign up, we start a bank account for you. And then if you get hurt, let's just say you break your arm and it's $5,000, you'll pay the first $500 of that. And then we'll go out to 100 or 45 people in the crowd and ask them each for $100 to help Dr. Anthony with his broken arm. They can say yes or they can say no. If they say yes, then $100 goes from their account to your account.
Mhm.
And ultimately, at the end of the day, you then have $4,500 in your account, plus your 500 that you're paying to pay for your broken arm.
Mhm.
The beauty is that you can pay for your broken arm in cash now, typically at the point of care. And
Mhm.
so doctors love that because they don't have to bill insurance. And I'm sure you've experienced this, like it's a huge pain in the ass
Mhm.
to bill insurance. And so if you're willing to pay cash at the point of care, doctors are willing to give you a significant discount. And in fact, we're getting our members about a 50% discount versus what the health plans are paying for the same procedures and services. So that's where all the savings is coming from, is just enabling people to pay cash at the point of care.
Mhm.
Um, and doctors love it.
Yeah, well, I would imagine. I mean, that's the whole idea. I mean, people hear me harp on about Professor Thomas Sowell, but I mean, he talks about the sort of limitations in the systems and third party payers. We have like a government sort of
Yeah.
system where the government's neither accept receiving the care nor responsible for the money, like it's not their money, and so you end up getting the worst of both worlds. And then insurance companies would be a second payer. They're worried about keeping costs down. They're not all that worried about you getting the best healthcare necessarily, unless it gets to the point that people say, okay, we'll just screw that insurance base,
Hmm.
we'll go somewhere else. And then of course you mentioned, like, the tyranny of the insurance company system and insurance system. I mean, there is one. I mean, that you can't compete cross state lines with insurance companies. That was one of the
Right.
things. I spoke to people that were actually involved in the policy making decisions during the Obamacare Act. Actually, a guy who was in my class in medical school was actually partially
Hmm.
involved in that, in a small role. But when they were trying to put that through, the Obamacare sort of through, they were getting obviously a lot of pushback, from the lobbyists and the insurance companies. And he basically said, "Listen, you guys should back me on this, because the other alternative is to open up the state lines and let everybody compete. So, if you come with me, you'll probably do better than if we do that, and just the free market actually just drops the prices down." And they went, "Oh, okay, all right, we'll do that." And they ended up losing out more on that, I think. And
Yeah.
so didn't work out for them. But it was that sort of cartel mindset. They wanted to do what's best for them to create a false monopoly, and a forced monopoly,
Hmm.
which has been said that you can't have without government intervention. If you have a true free market system, you can't have a monopoly. Even when Rockefeller,
Yeah.
a lot of people in this space hate Rockefeller, but just an interesting fact that when he actually had 92% of the market share for the oil, prices were actually going down, and they kept going down, even though he had
Hmm.
a monopoly. But he didn't have a monopoly. He had 92% of the market share because it actually was a free market, and he was just providing a better product at a better price. And then by the time the big trust busting surge went through America, he only had something like 24% of the market. But now he's this powerful monopoly and has to be broken up. And so it's just sort of funny in that regard. But um, that's
Well, I
fantastic.
think so. One of the things you said is, I think, Sowell would basically say that what we have in healthcare is a principal agent problem.
Mm.
And in essence, what's happening here is that the agent, which is our insurance plan,
Mhm.
we are giving them the responsibility of going out and negotiating really good prices for us. At least that's the idea,
Mhm.
right? We're supposed to be able to negotiate as a big group of people against the other end of it, which is typically hospital systems.
Mhm.
But in essence, what happened is with Obamacare is Obamacare legislated that the insurance plans could only make a 15% profit on the
Mhm.
premiums. So if you have $1,000 of premiums, you can only make $150. So from the outside looking in, that's a great idea. They're like, oh, great. Insurance plans can't gouge the public. But the problem is that then incentivizes the insurance plans to have premiums go up, right? So how do
Right.
you grow your profit by 10%? Well, the premiums have to go up by 10%. And so in essence, what that did was our agent wants the prices to go up, the insurance plans, they're the buyers of healthcare. the sellers of healthcare, which are these big hospital systems, they want the price to go up. And so you have the buyer and the seller of healthcare both wanting the price to go up
Oh
now.
my God.
And
Ugh.
so that's, people ask me like, oh, this healthcare is so complex. Like, why is the price is so high? I was like, if you have the buyer and the seller of healthcare both wanting to go, the prices go up, then the prices going up. And so there's no free market within healthcare. And what we're trying to do is saying, hey, you as an individual actually have more negotiating power against the hospital than United Healthcare does. I mean, if you think
Mhm.
about it, United Healthcare is oftentimes negotiating, even if they wanted to negotiate, against duopolies or oligopolies in some of these cities. So I live in Austin, Texas. There are 2 hospital systems in Austin. You have to have both of them in your network, or else you're going to lose out in Austin. And so when United Healthcare, if they wanted to come in and say, I'm cutting your prices, the hospital system says, okay, bye. And United Healthcare is like, okay, well, I'm totally out of the Austin market. And so you get these, oligopolies against the duopolies, and just prices just, rise. And so we, as individuals, can go in and say, hey, doc, how much is this actually going to cost? Can I negotiate with you?
Yeah.
And they will. 95% of the time, if you ask for a cash price, the cash price is 30 to 40% lower than what the health insurance plan will pay for. So
Yeah.
you actually are a better negotiator than United Healthcare, which is a pretty cool thing.
Hey guys, just want to take a second to thank our sponsor, Carnivore Bar. I don't promote many products because honestly, all you need to be healthy is to just eat meat. For those times that you're out hiking, road tripping, or stuck at work and you want a nutritious snack that is just meat, fat, and salt if you want it, the Carnivore Bar is a great option. So I like this product not because it's just pure meat, but also because I want the carnivore market to thrive as well. And the more we support meat-only products, the more meat-only products there will be available in the mainstream. So if this sounds like something you'd like to get behind, check it out using my discount code Anthony to get 10% off, which also applies to subscriptions, giving you 25% off total. All right, thanks guys.
Yeah, well, that's a very good point, and very, good way of putting that as well, because that is what they say, right? Well, if you have a whole government and saying, well, we're gonna negotiate better because we're such a big client, we can get better prices, but it actually isn't true. And I've seen time and time again since I was in high school, people would go in and say, hey, look, I'm paying for this cash. Like, how much would that cost? And I mean, sometimes I've seen even more than 30-40%. I've seen easily 75%, sometimes 50% is very typical. And that's, and my good friend of mine, I grew up playing rugby with, he actually went in, he had some stitches and things like that he needed to get. And he's like, listen, I don't have insurance. I'm just paying for this by cash. Like, how much would it be? And they dropped the price down really low. It was like 75% off. And he's like, whoa, really? He's like, yeah, if you pay this cash right now, it's, we'll charge you 25% of what the cost is. And he's like, how does that work? He said,
Yeah.
a large portion of medical bills in America don't get paid. And then you're like Medicare and insurances, they have to fight with these people for a long time to get paid. And they were saying, at least that person said to him at the time, if everyone just paid their bills and we didn't have to sort of deal with insurance companies, like, this is how much we would have to charge to actually make the profit that we need on the hospital. Like, wow,
Right.
that's pretty impressive. And so, yeah, it is worth their while to do that. Also, if you look at it's called like the road to success in medicine, ROAD. So like radiologist, orthopedic surgeon, ophthalmologist, anesthesiologist, dermatologist, those are the specialties to go into if you actually want to have a comfortable living, as opposed to some of the other things. I mean, you're not gonna go broke being a doctor, but it is certainly not the heyday for making money in medicine anymore, not by any stretch of the imagination. And so those are typically specialties where people still get more money, because a lot of the time they're getting paid cash for a service, and so they can actually make more money. And as a result of that, a lot of their procedures, which used to be extremely expensive, like LASIK eye surgery, is much cheaper. You have applications of free market forces to that. At first, it was like $10,000 an eye, and there's only a few people doing it. It wasn't that very good of quality, but then more people said, hold on, I can get 10 grand for 15 minutes work. Like, yes, I'll do that. And so more and more people started doing it. They had more and more procedures. The technology got better. People's experience got better. Now you can get it, well, in America anyway, you can get this for $1,000 an eye.
Yeah.
or less, and it's better quality. You're doing it with someone who's done 20,000 procedures, and it costs next to nothing. And that's what happens, where you contrast that with things that are, Milton Friedman did a sort of an economic experiment where he tried to find something that wouldn't sort of change with technology. Obviously, technology gets cheaper, more expensive when it's newer, so you can't really look at that. But what about just the cost of being in a room for one day, just overnight in a hospital? And he looked at that from the beginning of the induction of Medicare until, I think it was like the 1980s at some point when he did this. And he calculated that was sort of like a 30-year period or something like that, 20-30-year period, whatever it was. And he calculated out that the cost of just physically being in a room without any sort of treatment or anything like that went up by 2,200% since Medicare came in. So it was actually making things more expensive and more costly, as opposed to making things less costly, like you're doing.
Yeah. Perfect example of this. And I just put this on Twitter the other day. One of the things with Obamacare was they forced health insurance plans to pay for contraception. And so there's this really interesting graph where it's the 10 years before insurance plans started paying for contraception and the 10 years after. And so the 10 years before, it was just chugging along, 0% real. And then literally the year that Obamacare went it went hockey sticked. It went up by like 300% as soon as insurance plans, started paying for it. And so once you rip the free market out of the system, prices go haywire, right? And so that's in reality what we're trying to do is bring free markets back to healthcare. And here's the beautiful part of this, right? Is I always say that you work for whoever pays you. And if the insurance companies are paying these doctors, the doctors work for the insurance companies. They want to work for you, but in reality, they're getting paid by the insurance companies. And so they have to do what the insurance companies want them to do, or else they're not getting paid. But if I pay my doctor, the doctor now works for me, right? Like I am his customer, and you are treated as such. I mean, it's amazing when you go to the doctor and say, hey, I'm paying you, what the difference is. And so I'll give you one quick example. I was unfortunately at the cardiologist like 6 or 9 months ago. All is good, but they had some tests that I had to do. I had to do a stress echo test, I think it was. And so I went and the doctor's like, hey, I'm going to give you an order to go get a stress echo. Will you go do that? I was like, great. First off, that stress echo cost me under $200. A guy on Twitter reached out to me and said he had a stress echo with an insurance plan. It was like $5,000, which was absolutely crazy. But then the cardiologist said, he's like, look, since you're paying for this, can I just call you on the phone? Normally I would have you come in, because you could bill for it. I'd have you come in and we can go over the things, but I'm just going to call you on the phone if that's okay. I'm like, hell yeah, that's okay. The last thing I want to do is come into a doctor's office and wait in a waiting room and do this all over again, right? And so it's cool to see that the doctor-patient relationship, is without middlemen when you're paying your doctor directly, and it really does change the game.
Yeah, absolutely. And that again, you have these different sort of procedures or different sorts of specialties that do largely cash-based sort of payments, and it makes things. A perfect example of that too would be like plastic cosmetic surgery.
Yes.
This is a cash-based sort of system. Like insurance isn't going to cover somebody who's having a cosmetic nose job or something like that, unless you had an accident or something like that it needs to be fixed for actual medical purposes. If you're just saying like, I don't like the hook on my nose, I'm just going to change that, it's not going to be covered, obviously. And so I mean, your daughter's ear tubes weren't even covered. Like they're not going to cover like a cosmetic surgery. And so, but these prices go down. Now more and more people are getting into that because they can actually make money off of it instead of sort of fighting with insurance and all these sorts of things. I'll give you a good example of the sort of.
We should have a nose job index. Like let's look at the cost of a nose job.
Yeah.
On a yearly basis. I bet you it's pretty flat to actually going down. In real terms, it's probably going down. Whereas healthcare generally is, going up and almost like a parabolic, curve. So it's amazing when LASIK, you mentioned LASIK before too. Like
Mhm.
LASIK since 2000 or 2001 has just gone plummeted from,
Yeah.
I think it was like $6,000 or $7,000 an eye to now under $1,000 an eye in some places.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll give you an example of some of this strange stuff too. And as far as like a doctor's concerned, how much of a pain this is to deal with people is because, personal example, this year I've been doing sort of private sort of work in neurosurgery. So I've been assisting other neurosurgeons in the private practices and things like that while I'm doing all my other things on the side. So it's a good way of making money on the side, sort of moonlighting. And they have this system in Australia where you have a medical license, your license to practice, then you have a medical registration number that's somehow different than your licensing number. And then you have something called a provider number. So every single different hospital or clinic that you work in, you need to apply, and it takes weeks and sometimes months, if it even comes in time, to get a new provider number. So you get accepted, you're qualified, you're licensed, but you can't actually do anything there until you get this stupid number, and you have to apply for every single thing. I mean, first of all, the amount of bureaucratic paperwork and cost to the tax base is just insane. What you're adding to this, I mean, just completely unnecessary work. And so I had a provider number for this hospital, this private hospital. And so I didn't think anything was wrong. And so I was doing this work and, doing these, help assisting these private surgeries and things like that. And everything was fine. Everything was fine. But then, the secretary was saying, was like, hey, having a bit of a, issue sort of getting you paid and all this sort of stuff. Medicare from the government isn't, just being a bit of a pain. Is that all right? It's like, yeah, it's fine. Look, it's not a big deal. And after a few months of this, they came back to me and said, hey, look, we just spent, or I just spent, the secretary spent like 2 hours on the phone trying to figure out like why the hell I wasn't getting paid. Finally got through to the right person. He said, oh, well, he has the wrong kind of provider number. He has a provider number that allows him to work there, allows him to make referrals, allows him to request imaging and studies and lab tests, but not actually get paid. It's like, oh, well, that's good. That's very useful. So not only do I need a different provider number for each different bloody hospital, I need a different kind of provider number if I actually want to get paid. It's like, why would I not?
Why would there be a provider number where you
Can't
can't get
paid?
paid? What's the
Yeah,
point of that?
exactly. Yeah, exactly. It's just so stupid. And the thing is, too, the insurance companies have a racket with this too, because they know that the government, I mean, they just make it as difficult as possible so that they don't have to pay you, because they're the ones, they are incentivized to not pay you. And so they're incentivized to make this as hard as possible so that you can't get paid. Oh no, we don't backdate. If you don't have a provider number, this and the other, no, that was just free. You're just doing volunteer work. And the insurance companies are in on this racket too, because even though I'm on that, all the documentation saying that I was in that surgery, I did that, I helped that surgery, they won't pay unless Medicare pays. And they know it's next to impossible to get those bastards to choke up $1. So, they're in good standing, because yeah, I know you did the surgery. I know you did this and this, and it's privately insured, and you get $50 from Medicare, but yep, no, if they don't think you deserve to get paid, we don't think you deserve to get paid. It's complete and utter crap. And so I think I need to talk to a lawyer, but basically I lost out on 6 months work. I haven't been
Yikes.
paid for that.
But now it's a perfect example of why, doctors don't want to get paid by a third party. Like it's just so much easier to get paid with cash at the point of care. Like, you're getting paid, and you don't need a crazy provider number to do it. I mean, the bureaucracy that you see in healthcare is legit. I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen that that graph that's going around social media right now, but it basically shows the growth of doctors versus the growth of administrators over the last, I think it's like 30 or 40 years or something like that. And the growth in doctors is just a flat line, whereas the growth in administrators, again, goes up and to the right. And it started off with like the amount of administrators and doctors being the same. And now it's like 30 or 40 times the amount of administrators as there are actually doctors. And people are crazy by this, but like we spend about $4.6 trillion in the United States on healthcare. It would be the fourth largest GDP if it were a country, behind China, Japan, the United States. And so, only 8% of that actually goes to the doctors.
Yeah.
So 8% of our total healthcare spend actually goes to the doctor.
Yeah.
The rest of it goes to back end, bureaucratic, administrative. There's some other practitioners there too, but a lot of that is just, stuff that can get ripped out of the system if you just pay with a credit card at the point of care. And that's what we enable.
Yeah, well, that's what I heard years ago, like, before I even went into medical school, was that, people were talking about how the reason that medical expenditures or costs were so high is because these damn doctors get paid too much. And
Yeah.
I saw an economist at the time who said basically what you're saying now, which is if you didn't pay doctors 1 cent, it wouldn't appreciably lower the cost of healthcare at all. Right.
Right.
And so, I mean, think about that. You get 8% off. It's not even like a 10%. Oh yeah, 10% off, whatever. It's not even that, it's
Yeah.
even like a, Friday special sort of thing for 10% off, bring your friend and get 10% off or something like that. It's like, it's not even that. So it's
10% is even hardly worth it when you're going for the 10% off,
yeah.
the ribeye at the local Chili's. Like, that's not even something that you're gonna, bat an eye at.
Yeah. I was like 10%. What the hell is that? Yeah. And so, I mean, like your $8,000 procedure. So you get $800 off that. Okay. That's not nothing, but it's like still you're paying $7,200 and that's what goes just to the hospital. I saw this as well. Thing is the doctor is the face, right? You're going there to see the doctor, but obviously you're seeing the doctor and that pays for everything else. Right.
Right.
So obviously he's not getting that. And, I remember talking to them about different chemotherapy agents now, like $60,000 a month for this, and they're like, "Oh my God, well, look at that! That guy must be, just in a mansion and this that, and the other." But like the doctor doesn't get paid that. Like
Doctor's not getting paid that.
don't
That's
get
the
paid
pharmaceutical,
squat. Yeah, exactly.
end of the cartel that's getting paid for that crazy amount.
Yeah, exactly. So but you see that the face man is the doctor, so that and you see the bill and you associate that bill with that face, being like, that son of a bitch, So
Yeah.
8%. I didn't know that particular figure, but that's good to know exactly what that is. It's funny.
And then we'll hear in the US too, like from what I've seen, the stats is each doctor has about 3 billing people per doctor to allow them to bill. Right. So, and they have the billing system that they have to go through, the EMR, EHR, whatever it is that they're billing. It usually takes like somewhere between 3 and 5%, sometimes 6% of the revenue off the top. And so you start getting all of these middlemen, all these rent seekers, who are trying to take a piece of the action. And by the end of the game, it's not the doctors, it's just the administration, bureaucratic BS that sucks up most of the costs. So we just need to rip that out of the system.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of that in many other industries, the education industry, others, administrative bloat. I mean, we're increasing the cost of education budget, and that does not go to teachers. That largely goes to administrative bloat, because in a lot of states, the administrators, anybody working for the school system, is required to be in the school lobby or the school union. And like you said, if the insurance companies only get paid 15% of their premiums, obviously they want premiums to go up. Same thing with the education union, is that they get paid for union dues, and so they need head count. And so they don't necessarily care if Joe Schmo teacher, Jane Schmaine, more female out there, who they don't care if they get paid more money. They just want them to be quiet enough that they keep in line and keep paying dues. They want more numbers, they want more head counts. So in a lot of school districts, and Tom Sowell writes about this and shows the numbers, but they have entire buildings. They build an entire multi-million-dollar building just to house superfluous administrative staff and secretaries that just sit there all day.
I've heard this.
I've been to one of those. They were so bored that like literally like 6 people just jumped up and were like, "Hey, can I help you?" "Oh yeah, it's great." Yeah. Because they were just sitting there.
Oh my gosh.
And
that's our tax dollars going to work, which is just preposterous.
I mean, and you think of the small fractional percentage, because I mean, it's not like these people are paying even 8% of their salary, to the union. I mean, they're paying, a few $100. maybe.
Yeah.
And so it's like they just want this mass number so they can get more money. It is such a bizarre system, but they think of this as a business. It's just like, well, we need to increase our revenue, and this is how we get revenue. And so that's what they have to do. It doesn't matter how much cost it is for other people. It doesn't matter how much harm it causes to other people.
Right.
I'll give a good example of sort of the wasteful spending that we see here in the public system. And now people in America who want a public healthcare system, think about the VA system. How good is that? Now, I don't think I've ever met anybody who said, yeah, the VA system, that's great, let's nationalize that. But that's what
Right.
it is, and we spend more on the VA system, far more. We spend about 10 times more per full-time patient in the VA system than we do for the national average, right? We spend nearly $100,000 per full-time patient, because not everybody's a full-time patient in the VA. Most people, if they can afford it, go elsewhere. But per full-time patient, they pay about $100,000 per person per year. And the national average in America, at least last I checked, was like $9,600. It might be over $10,000 now, but that's
around there.
It's around 10 times the amount of money, and it sucks. It's even worse, and that's because the system is worse. If you want to go from New York to England, and you're in a rowboat, and you have 2 oars, and you say, okay, oars make this go faster. If I add more oars, this will just go even faster. So I add 500 oars, and that'll make it go faster. And it's just like, no, that's a dumb system. Like, the more you spend on that, the worse it's going to be. Now you're going to sink the dinghy. And that's what happened with the VA system. It was horrible wait times. People weren't satisfied. People were committing suicide because they were waiting so long to see doctors. And so they said, okay, well, we have, and they tried to cover it up too. That's the other reason why you don't want these people involved, because you can't let the referees be involved in the game, because they're always going to win. And so they got called out on this. They tried to cover it up. It got uncovered. And so they said, okay, well, we'll increase the budget. They increased the VA's budget by 50%, and the wait times increased. They got worse, because like the dinghy and the rowboat analogy there, it's just a bad system. It's inefficient. A buddy of mine worked for Stryker, and he would, at the time, he was revamping or just making entire new operating rooms. And it was multi-million-dollar contracts, putting all this state-of-the-art equipment in. And he went into a VA hospital, and the hospital manager there was just like, yeah, we just did this contract with this other company, spent $18 million, brand new operating rooms, whole suite of operating rooms. And I'm just not happy with it. I want you to gut it out and put all new Stryker stuff in with it. And he was like, okay, so that was another $24 million. And he said, okay, what do you want us to do with the equipment? Do you want to sell it? Do you want to do this? She's like, just get rid of it. $18 million worth of equipment. She just said, just get rid of it. It's not her money. She doesn't give a shit.
Yeah.
So it's just like, yeah, whatever, just get rid of it. And so that you see that sort of waste. So in my field, in neurosurgery here in Australia, so they have a bit of a mixed picture. The hospitals are incentivized to actually get people home and have good outcomes, unlike in Europe, where it's just you have a budget at the beginning of the year and that's it, and all the patients are just the enemy, and you want to deal with as few patients as possible, because you don't want to spend this precious hoard that you have. And so here you are actually incentivized to get people home on time. It's not a great system, but it's at least has some sort of incentive models in the right direction. But for non-emergency patients, where someone's not dying or about to lose a limb, it's pretty backwards. So the government wants to pay as little as possible, so they put a lot of roadblocks in the way, so they make it very difficult for us to see non-emergency patients. And so at the moment in neurosurgery, if you're a category 3 non-emergency, non-life or limb threatening sort of condition, it's right now a 4.5-year waiting period just to get a first-time appointment.
Oh, for God's sakes.
Yeah, 4.5 years. And so then when you get seen, it's not like you're going to get surgery that week. You probably will get another MRI, because your MRI is 2 years stale at this point, or 3 or 4 years stale at this point. You have to try conservative methods, try different sorts of things, different sort of approaches. And then this may take months or a year, and then, to work this properly up, because you're never seeing somebody, earlier than 3-month intervals. and you're not going to get an MRI before 3 months unless it's like an emergency. And so you're just things just stalling out. And then eventually you say, okay, yeah, well, we've done everything that we need to do to work this up. You qualify for surgery. We'll put you on the waiting list. Category 3, it's going to be a year or 2 before you get surgery. So real wait times from seeing your doctor and getting referred to a neurosurgeon to when you're actually getting surgery could be easily 5 to 6 years normally, right? And so, some of these people,
Surprised people aren't dead by then.
Well, the thing is that that's the thing. Like if it is more urgent, actually the emergency system here actually works pretty well. Actually can do something. If someone has like a tumor, like in Ireland, it was like, even if you had a tumor or something like that, it was a mandatory 2-year wait to get in to see a specialist of any description. Mandatory minimum 2-year wait. And so obviously that doesn't work too well if you have a new presentation of a brain tumor. Here it's different. You actually can get, if you go in, they'll see like, okay, this person's not doing so well. Clinically, they might have a space occupying lesion. You get a CT, like, oh, that's not good. Things happen very quickly. So that is actually very good. The emergency service is very good here. It's the non-emergency service that is very bad. And so a category 3 would be something that's just like pain. Could be debilitating, extreme pain where they can't get up, they can't walk, they can't work, they can't do anything, but their leg still works and they're not going to die, right? It's just extreme pain. But a lot of these people don't work because they're in so much pain they can't work. You have pain, it's pinched nerve shooting down their leg or in their arm. They can't function, and they're on just handfuls of medications every day. That has a cost. And you're doing that for 5 years, 6 years. Like, how much is the cost of all that medication? But also, these people are not working. The taxes here are onerous, to say the least. And so, you typically, you can spend easily, 40-50% of your salary on income tax, right? And so the government's losing out on that. It makes no sense. The government's trying to save money by pushing this stuff off, just kicking it down the road, not giving us the resources to do surgery and see patients. And so they're making this delay another 4, 5, 6 years before they get treated, and they're not getting paid that whole time. So you have these people that are not working the whole time. So they're suffering, they're in pain the whole time. So obviously that's not what you want to do, but also they're not working. So they're losing out on all of their income. They're not forwarding their career. They're not getting promotions and raises and all that sort of stuff. And the government's, not getting their protection money out of that and getting their 40%. And then they're also paying disability on top of that. Right. And this is all to avoid paying, if you paid cash, $12,000 operation. Right. And so, if someone's making, this is what Thomas Sowell points out, with the healthcare systems and the government healthcare systems, because of the delays, it's like, what is your time worth? Right. So 5 years, if you're, and this is from the patient perspective as well. So it's like, can you not figure out how to get 12 grand, like take a loan, do something so that you can get back to where, I can't afford to do that. You can't afford not to do that. When I explain that to patients, they get it. When I explain that to other doctors, they sometimes get it. They often don't get it. They're like, well, this is the system and they should do it. Okay. Yes, that's fine. That's the system. They shouldn't have to pay because they pay taxes, but the system sucks. And this is the system. And this is the reality of it. And if you want to sit there and be in pain for 10 years or 5 years, that's your business. But if you want your patient to get back to work, well, they can't afford to do that. I'm like, really? It sounds like they can't afford not to do that. Your patient's making $150,000 a year, and you're saying he can't afford a $12,000 operation that will get him back to work 5 years early. I'm pretty sure that that's exactly what he needs to do. He can't afford to wait, really. And so that's the thing, unless you make less than $2,000 a year, then just paying the 12 grand is actually worth it, right? From an economics. Right. But people don't really see that, and they don't really understand that it makes such a massive difference to their lives to just pay for what they're doing. And if you had that, the entire system, then, like you're talking about, doctors would be happier because they would actually be getting paid. You don't have to deal with Medicare and Medicaid in the US, which can take 9 months to over a year just to get paid. So you have to
Get
have,
paid.
yeah,
Yeah.
you have to be able to float your entire practice, which is a business. You have to be
Hmm.
able to float your entire business and your company for a year or more sometimes just to get paid, and it's going to be better for the patients as well because they're not going to have to pay as much. And so now you're not paying all this administrative bloat and middlemen and everything like that to gouge prices and gouge rates and work in the system. Somehow they get restricted this way. Okay, it's just going to pressure moves where pressure goes, right? So if you start putting pressure here, it's just going to squirt around the side. They're going to look for something. What you need to do is open it up so there's no pressure and people just get to interact normally and actually be able
Hmm.
to compete in a traditional fashion.
I never understand the people who advocate for a full public system, but
Mm.
there are, and it sounds like it's mostly people who've never experienced a full public system to see the downsides of that. They only see the lower cost, but the lower cost comes with the cost, with an actual cost. And then they look at our system, they say, oh, well, look, the United States is twice as expensive as everybody else. And look at the outcomes. The outcomes are even worse because our, life expectancy is going down and things like that. And then I think what people really miss is like, well, look, the obesity rate in the United States is twice other, economically developed. And so you're not going to get the same results with a ACL tear with somebody who's, 350 pounds as you would with somebody who's 175 pounds, right? And so the unfortunately the results of some of these are not as good if you're looking at it just kind of purely in a without an adjustment for obesity. And so I think there's an issue there too that I know that you talk about a lot, just in terms of, what we eat and the nutrition and things like that. But from my perspective, and I think you agree with me on this, is doctors don't typically get trained on that part of the bit,
Mhm.
healthcare in medical school, right? There's not a lot of nutrition in medical school, and I'd almost argue that's probably good because I'm
Yeah,
not sure they would get the right training anyway.
totally agree. Yeah.
And so it's such a screwed up system in so many ways, and that's where it's like nutrition, healthcare. I mean, these things are so intertwined. I think the monetary system is intertwined too, just because we don't have to really pay attention to the cost of things if we have a monetary system where we're just going to print money and print money and
Mm.
print money and print money, and not have to like own it. And so all three of these things I think are the trifecta of the fall of the American empire here. My guess is over the next decade or two.
Yeah, well, I mean, I certainly hope not. I mean, that's something that Sowell and other people have been warning about. That there is a point of no return, and people can right the ship and do these sorts of things, but eventually things go down, and there was a fall of Rome, and ancient Athens and the other sort of fleeting bright spots of freedom
Yeah,
that people
they've
have.
all come down at some point.
Yeah.
And unfortunately it's about 50 years over after they depeg their currency from an underlying asset, and we're now
Mm.
50 years after being depegged from the underlying asset. So
Yes.
I don't see how with the current deficits the United States is going to have to be able to come back from it.
No.
We're running $1 trillion deficits right now, and so what are you going to take away from people to make up for that $1 trillion? The problem with government spending, and Sowell says this, is once you give something to somebody, it's hard to take it away.
Yeah.
The perfect example is in COVID. They had this special subsidization of Obamacare plans, but I think they went up to 400% of the federal poverty level or something, where they would fully subsidize these plans. Well, that was supposed to be a one-time thing because people were struggling during COVID. Well, guess what? They extended it last year for another 3 years. And now 2 years from now, or 1 year in, 2 years from now, are politicians really going to be able to say, you know what, we're not doing that anymore? Now we're not subsidizing you, and everybody's healthcare costs go up? They're going to be like, no. They're going to say, of course, we love the people. We love the people. We want them to, get free healthcare. So we're going to continue the subsidization. I think it's $100 billion a year or something like that, which is
It
kind of
is.
nothing in the grand scheme of things in the United States economy, it seems like. But those are the types of things where once you give it, you can't take it away. And we are set up in a system where as soon as, the population understands that they can, vote people into office who are just going to give them stuff, then that's when you start seeing the decline. And I think we're, unfortunately past the point of no return on some of this stuff, because I just don't see anybody pulling back some of these, entitlements and other things that are going to be required. And I think healthcare is, a huge, huge part of that. Because everybody thinks healthcare is a right. And maybe it is. I mean, I don't know. I'm not versed enough in kind of rights to argue one way or the other, but it sure is hell really, really expensive and taking a massive chunk out of the US, budget, so much so that I think it's going to end up putting us into a really, really difficult situation the next decade or two.
Yeah, well, I think a good explanation of of rights is that something can't be a right if it causes an obligation in someone else. So it's like
Mm,
if you have a right to healthcare, that means that I have an obligation to as a doctor to serve you for free, and so that turns my labor, that takes away my labor and takes away my freedom.
hmm
So you can't have that. So that's that doesn't really work. But a right to liberty, a right to freedom, a right to the pursuit of happiness, meaning that you get to strive to be happy. No one owes you happiness, because that means different things to different people, and wouldn't be able to provide that for people.
right. What
But
we bifurcated that though, right? We bifurcated the benefits that we get from having to actually pay for it. And
Mhm,
so what happens is that if we don't directly pay for something, then we're going to try to, extract as much value out of the system as possible. It would be an interesting, experiment to say, hey, listen, yes, we can go spend $100 billion fighting this war in Ukraine. I'm not making a political statement about the war in Ukraine. I'm just making it as
mhm,
an example. But okay, United States, is everybody in the United States willing to pay, $1,000 or whatever to make that happen? I bet you a lot more people would probably say, no, I don't want to do that. Because right
yeah,
now we don't really feel it, right? Because all we do is just put it on debt and we kick the can down the road. And
mhm,
so that's really easy to do. It's a really easy decision to make when we don't actually have to pay for it. If we actually have to pay for it, then I think a lot of people will be like, I'm not putting in $1,000 to
mhm,
fight this war, right? Or I'm not putting $1,000 in for all these people who did have to pay for healthcare, now getting healthcare for free, and I have to pay for it. And so once you take those two things apart, the benefit and paying for it, things just break, right?
mhm,
And that's what's happening with our economy. It's what's happening with healthcare. Look, in healthcare, we pay our premium every month, generally if you're in with insurance. But so when you get hurt, you think that the system is screwing you. We all think health insurance sucks, and so we think we're getting screwed. We have to fight with the insurance company. But when we get the opportunity to go and actually extract value out of it, they're like, finally, all these years that I'm paying for health insurance, I actually get to use it. And so now I'm going to suck as much value out of the
yeah,
system as possible. And that just sends the system into a death spiral. I mean, what if you were in a group? Let's put this out there for a minute. Like, what if you were in a group of just carnivores, right? Or people who are in keto, or people who are in your church, or some other group that you feel very, very tight with, and they were helping you pay your healthcare expenses. Would you be nearly as willing to extract as much value out of that? Because now I'm taking Dr. Anthony's money. I'm not taking United Healthcare's money anymore. I'm
mhm,
taking Anthony's money. And it makes it much more personal, much more human. And so I think we need to get rid of those middlemen and make it human to human again, so that we bring a little bit of humanity back to, our government, our healthcare system, all of these things that have kind of like stuck themselves in between us and our neighbor. And I think has kind of stolen the idea of generosity and helping each other and community away from us. I kind of make this statement where in the 1970s and 80s, in most parts of the country, if somebody moved in next to you, you'd bring them something, like you bring them cookies or you do
mhm,
whatever, because that's their neighbor, right? Like you want to do that. Now in 2020, four, I guess we're in, is we're interested in if our neighbor moves in by how much they paid for that house, because that's an indicator of how much our house is worth,
yeah,
right? Like that's our primary interest. But I think that was because the reason is because all of those government things that they've installed in our system to protect us actually takes away our responsibility, our need for taking care of our community members. And that's the same thing that's happening with health insurance. It's like, man, let's put that back together. I mean, there's so much goodness in community. You know, I'm a Bitcoiner, so I hear this thing like sovereign individual, like, which is we are personally responsible for ourselves, which is an awesome thing. And what's even better is when you have a community of sovereign individuals getting together, you have a pretty powerful community, right?
Yeah.
If you don't have any freeloaders, everybody's personally sovereign for their own, their own health, their own nutrition, their own everything. You get all those people into a community. I mean, you can drastically lower the cost of doing healthcare in a community like that. So that's my long-winded way of saying I'm a huge Sowell fan. I think government should get out as much as possible. Health insurance should get out as much as possible and let us pay for our own stuff, because that's where free markets are. That's where community can be created. And it's a pretty powerful thing.
It is, and we had a solid 150 years of that in America, and we
Yeah.
saw this in real time, and we had an entire nation of sovereign individuals. That was the entire point. It's like, this is, you're king of your own castle, and this is your land. This is your land. This is basically everyone here has their own country. It's your land. That's your land, and and that's why you needed to own land in order to be able to vote, because it's just like, hey, this is everybody who are all the landowners. We're going to talk about what goes on with our land, right?
Yeah.
And you also had responsibilities. It was not a right to vote. It was a responsibility. You had to sign up for this, and you signed up for the responsibilities that came along with that, which was you had to be part of the fire brigade. You had to be part of the militia. You were eligible for the draft now. So, you couldn't be drafted into a war unless you were one of these, evil, patriarchal whatevers who were able to vote and were suppressing everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
That was part of your responsibility. And the women's suffrage movement in the 1800s were saying, well, women should be able to vote as well. 76% of women said, no, we don't want that, because it's a household vote. We don't think of this as like the man is voting. He's casting a vote for the household, and we decide as a household how we're going to vote. And also, we don't want to die in a fire and go to war. Like, what's wrong with you? Like, we don't want those responsibilities that come along with the not right to vote, the responsibility to vote.
Interesting point.
And so they said, okay, well, we'll get rid of the responsibilities, which I think is a big mistake. I think if you don't have skin in the game, it doesn't even have to be, owning land or something like that, but just the simple fact that, if you are voting on a war that you can't be drafted into, doesn't affect you on that, then it's like, you might think about things differently.
Yeah.
And so,
amen.
It's having those responsibilities that tie up with it. You're just going to think about things a bit differently, and certainly going to pay for things differently. Like you said, about people, being sovereign, they're going to spend things more carefully. No one's going to spend your money more carefully than you are, right? Because it
Exactly.
personally hurts. Like, you look at that; those are hours of my life that I traded for that. And now I'm just not just going to waste it on something. Is be like, oh, great. Well, that was 500 hours of my life that I just flushed down the toilet. Great. I mean, that hits you personally, right? Someone else spending someone else's money, it doesn't even matter, especially when you start getting into these big figures, like you said, $100 million or $100 billion for these entitlements, but just a small subfraction of entitlements that are going out there. It's just like, yeah, whatever. It's not that big of a deal. When you start dealing with things like that, I mean, the amount of waste is astronomical. I have a good friend of mine that I grew up with. He's a corporate attorney in Seattle, and his firm, he was a partner in his firm, and they do a lot of big deals with like World Bank and other sorts of things. So they're giving like massive, government loans and building up whole infrastructures and things like that. So they're regularly doing $100-200 billion deals, right? And so they're going through all the fine points. I mean, it's a lot of different things in there that add up to $100 billion, $200 billion. And so there was this point, and it was just like the people on the other side of the table were just sort of like quibbling. They were trying to like fluff over this one part, and he was just, and he was a bit skeptical of that. So we looked into it, and basically it was about $36 million that they were going to get, superfluous that they really shouldn't have. And he was like, well, hold on a second. This $36 million, this isn't accounted for, it shouldn't be, just lumped in with this and that. And they're like, oh, well, it's not that big a deal. It's just $36 million.
Jeez.
I mean, it's $100 million deal. I mean, what's the difference? 36 million. It's nothing. And the guys on his table were like, yeah, I mean, what's the big deal? It's just $36 million. It's just $36 million. And he was just like, what the hell are you talking about? It's $36 million.
Right.
We're talking about this. We are absolutely going to sort this out. Like, no, this is stupid. And that's the thing. You're dealing with things of that scale. You just lose sight. It's just like, you're in from an airplane, you're looking down at ants, and it's just like, it's not that big a deal. It's just some ants. You just wipe them out. It's not that big of a deal. It's just $36 million. Who cares? It's not your goddamn money. That's why you should care.
Yeah.
You need to be responsible about this. I also, seen it argued and seen this in real life, that when you separate out the payment, like you say, when you don't see where your money's going for this payment, you just say, oh, it's just free. It's free healthcare. Instantly, you increase the demand without increasing the supply, because you can just go to the doctor for anything because it's free. So who gives a shit, right? So it's just like, you have a sniffle, it's a virus, it's going to get better in a couple of days, but you know what, I'll get the day off work. I can go to the doctor and all this sort of stuff. And so you do, so you massively increase, the demand, which increases the cost, because we don't have the same supply. That's how supply demand curves work. And whereas if you were paying for that, if you had to go and you had to pay a doctor, $100, $150 or something like that to see him, you wouldn't go unless it actually meant something to you. When I do consultations, like I don't do this as a job because I want to make money. I just want to make it worth it to people, so that they come to me with real problems that they can't figure out themselves. And I even say on my disclaimer, I was like, listen, I make all my videos available for free. I want people to be able to educate themselves for free. I don't want them to have to, this shouldn't be behind a paywall. So all this stuff is here. If you need special individual care that goes beyond that, I'm happy to do this, but, please try to answer your questions here. And I make it costly enough that it matters to them. So it's going to mean something to them, because if you don't do that, and it's just like, and it's just open season and everyone gets to book an appointment with me, I have absolutely nothing else that I can do with my life, because it's just going to be completely full, and it may or may not be for good reasons. And that's the thing with healthcare now, is that we've completely overrun the system with, superfluous appointments that people don't really need necessarily. Obviously, a lot of people do. But I think that regardless of the system, regardless of what you do, if it's a purely free market system, it's a purely one payer, universal healthcare, VA, wretched system, that either way, no matter how you do it, no system is going to survive the massive inundation of chronic diseases, of actual true illnesses. So 9% of Americans have diabetes. That accounts for 75% of the Medicare costs. And so 40% of Americans are pre-diabetic. So ostensibly within a decade, you could have fully 50% of the population of the United States fully diabetic. What the hell is that going to do to the healthcare cost? Dr. Robert Lustig estimated that, you say, like, was it $4.6 trillion we spend a year on healthcare? He estimated that we spend about 2.4 trillion of those dollars just treating the effects of sugar consumption alone, just sugar consumption.
Oh, that doesn't shock me. I know it's $1 trillion on diabetes patients directly. It doesn't shock me. There'd be another 1.4 on other sugar related metabolic health, concerns.
There you go. So, $1 trillion a year on diabetics, and you might quintuple the number of diabetics that we have out there, right? So this is pretty easy math. This gets out of control very quickly. This becomes larger than the annual federal budget of the United States, which everyone agrees is way over.
Yeah.
And so, people say,
well, diabetes is up from 1% in 1970,
Yeah.
now you said 9, I've seen
Right.
10, but it's
Well, that was a couple of
9x
years
or
ago.
10x, over the last
Yeah.
50 years, which is just crazy. And the vast majority of that, if not almost all of that, is type 2,
Yeah.
right? I mean, not
Exactly.
many more people are getting type 1s,
No.
it's type 2s.
Yeah. And so, interestingly enough, women that eat more gluten have more commonly have kids with type 1. Some sort of weird ass connection there. But so yeah, but that's your healthcare crisis.
Yeah,
You
it's
know,
crazy.
we're spending multiple trillions of dollars, and this is just the US, right? So I mean, this affects everybody. The diabetes rates in India and China are just out absolutely through the roof. I heard a statistic the other day. I think it was it's either 1 in 3 men or 1 in 3, or sorry, 1 in 4 men or 1 in 3 or 4 people. Jesus, why can't I speak? In India will die of a heart attack. That's massive. That's absolutely
Wow,
massive. And
that's
so,
crazy.
that's your healthcare crisis. And
So
regardless of what your system is, it's going to crash any system. If you keep compounding this chronic disease and all these problems, then you will never have a system that will work. It doesn't matter what the system is. It can be the most efficient and beautiful and wonderful system in the world. It's going to crumble. And
yeah,
so, I think it is very important to go outside of the medical system. But I think, at the same time, it's going to be the same people sort of, thinking about these things and thinking about their health and being health conscious. They're going to be going to your sort of system and saying, hey, this is sort of an emergency, just in case sort of thing. I'm not just going to be in here every single day because I'm going to take care of my health. I'm going to be more
yeah,
self-conscious about this. And they're seeing like, I'm not getting any bang for my buck out of this insurance plan. So I'm going to go to this other thing. But I heard a statistic as well a few months ago that it's something like 92% of healthcare costs go into, or 92% of the issues treated and healthcare costs go to treating chronic disease, right?
yeah,
So it's like 8-10% is the entire body of medical literature throughout antiquity, which is childbirth and delivery, pregnancy, childbirth and delivery, childhood, sort of diseases like congenital diseases, genetic abnormalities, infectious disease, trauma, and poisonings. You get poison
yeah,
exposure, you get bitten by something, or a scorpion bite or something, a scorpion sting, and now that's down to 8%, 10% of what we're doing. And the rest of it's 90% is just this chronic disease, which I think is actually in that last category, poisoning. I think we're poisoning ourselves, and malnutrition, right? You're not getting enough nutrients.
yeah,
And we're poisoning ourselves, and we're malnourished. And our bodies are just breaking down and getting sick. And we fix the way we eat, which is my whole, my whole mission here. And then you scrunch back down to that 8%,
yeah,
so that'll fine. You want government payer healthcare 100%, you go for it. But if you squeeze it down to that 8%, then it's at least manageable. Whereas it is not manageable right now. We have 4.5-year wait times just to get in to see somebody, and then it's a year or two before you get surgery. I mean, that's just not sustainable. I mean, people are really, really suffering, and
yeah,
you can float it for a while and just take care of the emergencies and just sort of push everybody else to the back, but you are hurting society while you're doing that, because those people are not functional members of society. They cannot be out there working. They cannot be out there, doing their job and contributing to the rest of society either. And now they're a drain on society. They're not paying taxes, and they're just taking disability. And for what? So that they can
hmm
sit there in pain for 6 years and not get treated. And by the time they get out, are they even qualified to do their job anymore? They haven't worked in 6 years. How the hell are you going to get a job after 6 years unemployed?
yeah,
That's really, really damaging to the people.
hmm
And so I think that definitely needs some work done. So I appreciate you throwing your hat in the ring and trying to do that.
yeah. Somebody's got to do it. Would love, any of your listeners to come join us if they want to be a part of something that's trying to change this crazy, crazy system. We've got, our folks are typically in their mid 30s. They're typically, nutritionally, aligned. We're getting lots of folks from, I've been on Dr. Sean Baker's, podcast, and the Meat Mafia guys, and a lot of those. So we've got a group of highly aligned, folks who are from my perspective, the perfect folks to, help each other with healthcare expenses. I'd prefer to fund those folks than the ones who are eating brownies on the couch, right now. So we've got a good group of people who to fund each other's healthcare expenses, and if anybody wants to join us, we'd love to have you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, to that end, how do people find you, and how do people take a look and learn more about your company?
Yeah. Joincrowdhealth.com is our website. Join Crowd Health on all of the kind of social media platforms. And if you use the code or the promo code plant free, it's the first 3 months are $99. So
Sure.
per person, which is, awesome to get your healthcare paid for $99 a month. And we'd love for you to try it and see what it's like. And um, that's less than your cable TV probably. So come in and try it. If you like it, great. Stick around with us because we've got a great group. And if not, that's fine too. But we think you'll like it. So join crowdhealth.com. Plant free is the promo code.
Awesome. And so part of that premium will go to like a savings fund, or how does that work?
Yeah. So let's just say of the 99, if you use the code, $50 comes to Crowd Health. That's just for us to pay our bills. And the rest of it goes to another person in the community that needs help that month.
Right.
So we don't touch that money. It just goes directly to them. And it's kind of cool to be able to know that your money is helping, Dr. Anthony or Abby in Tennessee or whoever, right? It helps them directly and not going to the United Healthcare's bottom line. So it is a peer-to-peer funding of healthcare expenses that's totally different from health insurance, and because of that, we're getting way better pricing, and which means it's way less expensive for our members.
Yeah, yeah, very good. And so is there any, so it's all directly to the person. Is there any like saving aspect and then using that to pay for things down the line, or is it really just direct to
Yeah, it's direct.
month?
And we are saving. I mean, I saved, $20,000 last year on healthcare expenses. I went to
Wow.
Obamacare and looked and saw like what I could get for me and my family. And
Mhm.
doing the math, we saved 20 grand.
Yeah,
If you're a
wow.
single person, you could probably save. If a single person in the United States is probably paying somewhere around $400 or $500 a month for health insurance. You probably have a $4,000 or $5,000 deductible. And so that's basically saying that the health plan has to pay $10,000 before or you have to pay $10,000 before the health plan pays, a dollar.
Yeah.
If you're a family, oftentimes it's $30,000 before the health insurance plan pays a dollar. So my Obamacare this year, I just checked it, and it was $1,400 a month, and I think it was an $18,000 deductible, which
Jeez.
basically means that you have to spend, 14 times 12, whatever that is, 106 or $16,000 plus an 18,000. So that's $34,000 that you have to pay before the insurance plan pays anything. And to me, that's just a total ripoff. Whereas our family of four with Crowd Health pays $600 a month, so $7,200 a year. And then I just pay the first $500 of any health event. We had 1 or 2 health events last year, so that'd be another 1,000. So that would be 8,000. So, pretty easy math. 32,000 minus 8,000. You
Mhm.
get in the mid $20,000 range in terms of savings. So that's the impact that Crowd Health can have on your financials.
Yeah.
So it's pretty significant.
Yeah, well, fantastic. Well, we'll put all those links in the description. And again,
Great.
code plant free if you guys want to have a less expensive introductory trial, and you can see what you guys think. Andy, thank you so much for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure. I enjoyed talking to you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Not a problem. Thanks everyone for watching. Please click the like and subscribe, leave a comment. It really helps the algorithm get this out there. And if you know someone that this might apply to or may help, please do share it with them. And we'll see you next time.